Brother Abdurrahman Kishida? Yes, sir. Can you hear us? Wa alaikum salam. Yes, sir. We can hear you very well. Thank you very much. So,
Good afternoon, everybody.
good
Hi,
afternoon.
Dr. Candice. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you? Is that Mr. Hanafi?
Yes, yes. How are you? Good to see you.
Very good to be here. Thank you so much. Mr. Hanafi, I just want to double check. I did my own confirmations from my side of the panelists who are available today. So what we're going to do is from the Clear AA side, Dr. Chirao is unfortunately tied up with another project, so he won't be able to stay for the entire session. So I'm going to take over the role of moderating the Q&A as well. Will that be in order?
Absolutely. That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. And then secondly, I also know that our representatives from the Kingdom of Lesotho, I think there's a Miss Lerato who is actually being represented by, let me just open my document. Yeah. So it's not both of them who will be present. It will actually be Dr. Emmanuel Letete, who's presenting on behalf of the Kingdom of Lesotho. So there's just one change compared to the brochure that you have.
Okay.
And then also the representative from Uganda was also not able to make it. So those are just three changes. And I was wondering whether, I could just comment on that when you hand over to me.
Exactly. I will not be addressing who the panelists are. I will just thank them for being on board. And yeah, I'll defer to you on introducing them and yeah, on who is available.
Okay.
Yes. And then
Thank you so much.
for the Q&A, whatever questions we get from the YouTube feed as well, I will send them to you so you have a selection to pick from. Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Hisham. English booth. It's test. Yes, Brother Hisham. Thank you very much. We can hear you. Thank you very much. Brother Mamadou, French booth. French. Thank you very much. Thank you. gentleman in the English booth, Brother Mahjoubi. Can hear us. English booth test.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in the second session of the 2022 ISDB Group Evaluation Symposium. My name is Zakaria Hanafi, and I'm Lead Evaluation Specialist at the Islamic Development Bank Operations Evaluation Department. And I'm honored to be the Master of Ceremony today. We have a wonderful session, a very focused and informative knowledge sharing session. This is the result of the collaborative effort between ISDB's OED department and the CLEAR Center for Anglophone Africa. In this session, titled Using Evaluation to Strengthen COVID and Post-COVID Recovery Efforts, our distinguished panelists and moderator will share insights from the perspective of various actors, including government representatives, MDBs, development partners, and academia. Just a few maintenance rules before we get started. Please note that if you are watching us on Zoom, you can listen to the event in Arabic, English, or French. You can choose any one of the simultaneous interpretation channels by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions during the session, please type them into the marked Q&A chat box in the Zoom or in the YouTube chat feed. We will bring them either during the intervention or we will address them at the Q&A session before closing. Now, allow me to introduce our very skilled and esteemed moderator, Dr. Candice Morkel. Dr. Morkel is the Director of CLEAR Anglophone Africa. She is a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Commerce, Law and Management at the University of Witwatersrand, with over 20 years of experience in government, academia, and the nonprofit sector, specializing in M&E, social policy, and public sector governance. Dr. Morkel has conducted or contributed to numerous policy and program performance reviews, including the first national review of the White Paper for Social Welfare in South Africa. She has extensive experience in evaluation curriculum and capacity development, including the globally recognized IPTET program, co-hosted by the University of Bern in Switzerland, CVAL, and the IEG of the World Bank. Her academic work includes teaching, research, and supervision of students on the postgraduate M&E program at the Wits School of Governance. Dr. Morkel has published in the field of M&E and presented at professional evaluation conferences in the US, Europe, and Africa. She served as chair of the South African M&E Association and as a board member of the African Evaluation Association. She was appointed to the Council of the International Evaluation Academy as recently as 2021. Her research interests include social policy, public sector governance and accountability, building capable developmental states, and strengthening evaluation systems and capacities. Dr. Morkel, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hanafi, and thank you very much for that very generous welcome and introduction. Esteemed colleagues of the IsDB, we are so excited to be part of the symposium, and thank you very much for partnering with us and allowing us to hold this session today, which is using evaluation to strengthen the COVID and post-COVID recovery efforts. Esteemed participants, colleagues, partners, we are really looking forward to your presentations as the panelists today, and we hope as participants that you will also be just as engaged and feel that you are able to ask questions and make comments when we do have that part of the session later today. So of course, the onset of the pandemic has affected all our economies, it's affected our health systems, our socioeconomic systems, and evaluation has had to respond just as much as any other governance system has had to respond to the crisis. And the question is, to what extent have our evaluation systems been able to be responsive to mitigate the various challenges that have compelled us to be reflective about what we bring to the table, to the governance table? And on the backdrop of these multifaceted challenges, then the IsDB has convened the symposium, which looks at reshaping evaluation through the lens of recovery. So a number of our panelists will actually talk to what they've done as their organizations or in their governments in terms of evaluation and how this might reshape evaluation going forward as part of this adaptivity and adaptation to the current crises that are facing us, and these external shocks that might be part of what we have to be facing going forward. Allow me to brief you on the flow of the day and how we will, take the panelists and where you as participants will come in for the question and answer session. So firstly, we hopefully will be hearing from Dr. Isahak Umar Idrisu, who is the director of the IsDB Regional Hub of Uganda, who will speak about the regional hub's work, especially in the areas of evaluation and evaluation capacity development. And I will ask each panelist to perhaps spend a minute introducing themselves, perhaps in a bit more detail, and doing a bit of a bio so that the participants also get to know a little bit about your work and who you are and what you do. This will then be followed by a very rich panel discussion on how M&E has strengthened the implementation of the COVID-19 recovery programs by Clear AA partners. So first of all, we have a presentation by Dr. Emmanuel Letete, who is the head of accountability in the Prime Minister's office in the Kingdom of Lesotho. Following Dr. Letete's presentation, we will then be greeted by Mr. Gringosta Kajomba, who is the Chief Economist, M&E Department of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs from the Republic of Malawi. And he will also provide us with a presentation on how the Republic of Malawi has responded and strengthened the implementation of these COVID-19 recovery programs. Our third panelist is Dugan Fraser, who is the program manager of the Global Evaluation Initiative, which is a part of the World Bank Group's programs. And Clear AA centers, or the Clear AA Center and other Clear centers, are implementing partners of the Global Evaluation Initiative. And Mr. Fraser will talk a bit about what the GEI does and how we partner to strengthen national evaluation systems and evaluation capacities. And then finally, we have a presentation by Professor Ian Goldman, who is a senior evaluation advisor with the Clear Anglophone Africa Center. Perhaps he can also spend a minute talking you through some of the other work that he does internationally in evaluation and evaluation capacity development as well. But Professor Goldman will be speaking to us specifically about rapid evaluations in strengthening recovery programs. After this, we will then open the floor. In fact, the chat or the Q&A box is open for your comments and your questions and on the YouTube channel. And those of us in the background will be keeping a keen eye on the Q&A chat box and on the YouTube chat so that we can collate your questions and we will then put them to the panel. And we'll have around about 20 minutes or so to engage with yourselves, and you will be able to engage with the panelists. So as a final closure, we will then hand back over as Clear AA to Mr. Hanafi our excellent host of the symposium, and he will be talking to us about the sessions of day 2 of the event, and that's how we will close off this event. May I now please hand over to Dr. Isahak Idrisu, Director of the ISDB Regional Hub of Uganda, who will speak about the regional hub's work. So Dr. Idrisu, are you indeed present?
Thank you very much, Dr. Candice, for this opportunity, and thanks to Hanafi for the brief introductory remarks. Distinguished panelists, esteemed participants, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Thank you. I am really delighted to be part of this distinguished guest panel and to address your audience today. Indeed, the topic this afternoon, using evaluation to strengthen COVID and post-COVID recovery efforts, is apt and very, very timely. I think that it's been 2 years, and there's the need for us to take stock, see what has worked, what hasn't been working, and what we need to do to make evaluation an integral part of the work that we do, and to make it very useful and beneficial. Now, briefly, as some of you may be aware, the Islamic Development Bank is a multilateral development bank that has been working over the last 46 years, established in 1975, to improve the life of the communities in its member countries, especially to quicken the pace of socioeconomic transformation and development in its member countries, and to deliver impact at scale. ISDB brings together 57 member countries across 4 continents and touching the lives of 1 in 5 of the world's population. Now, about the regional hub of Kampala, in 2018, the bank embarked on a decentralization drive, leading to the establishment of 11 regional hubs. The regional hub of Kampala, Uganda, is one of such hubs and is based in Kampala, Uganda, and covering Uganda, where it is hosted, Comoros, Djibouti, Mozambique, and Somalia. The regional hub of Kampala galvanizes the cooperation of the ISDB group in these countries and also provide technical oversight, project management, monitoring, resource mobilization, and financial management, including cooperation and knowledge sharing among its member countries based on its in-depth experience in promoting South-South cooperation. As you are well aware, IDB, the membership of IDB come from the South. And so we believe that best practices reside in any country, and in each country we should be able to find best practices, and we do encourage the sharing of these practices among our member countries. Now, in the wake of the COVID pandemic in 2019, the Islamic Development Bank came out with its strategic preparedness and response program to support member countries in dealing with the effects of the COVID pandemic, and it allocated 2.3 billion to member countries aimed at restoring livelihood, building resilience, and kickstarting economic growth, as captured in the 3 R's approach. That is to respond, to restore, and restart. And in each of these stages, the 3 R's, we have leverage, and technology is playing a key role at each stage of whatever we do. One of which, especially during the response stage, was the country platform that was set up by the bank. It was a very transparent system which allowed not only the sharing of information among relevant stakeholders, but it was also an opportunity for other people to get to know, partners to get to know what the ISDB was doing, and then the output that were delivered at the country level. Ladies and gentlemen, let me touch briefly on the importance of monitoring and evaluation. But suffice is to say that in all the countries that are covered by the regional hub of Kampala, all of them benefited from the support of the Islamic Development Bank. And we are now even into the 3rd R, in which most countries do intend to benefit. Now, monitoring and evaluation practices provide evidence used to inform decision-making during implementation of projects. The quality of developmental and social projects depends largely on the ability of the project implementer to demonstrate the achievements of the stated goals of the project. The aspect of monitoring and evaluation implementation provide evidence necessary for this demonstration. Also, monitoring and evaluation is becoming an increasingly important demand as implementing agencies and development partners are being called upon to demonstrate results and impact of the executed programs. The idea of having these systems in place is to ensure that public officials and program implementation units can be held accountable for the quantum of public spending and the efficient utilization of public finances for achieving the desired results. The common feature of most of government programs is that they are executed over a long time frame and changing government scenarios, which demands that it is necessary to have a continuous monitoring systems for policy evaluation and recording tangible results across the lifetime of the projects or programs. The impact of M&E systems lies not only in developing an evaluation system, but in ensuring that it fits well in the formal planning process and is simultaneously aligned to the process within executing agencies, line ministries, and local authorities. It is appropriate to develop built-in monitoring system based on field survey, field visit by experts, and conduct comprehensive assessment. So the process, the M&E process, are necessary steps towards establishing institutionalized mechanisms for achieving transparency and accountability, generating lessons learned for real-time improvements of the programs being implemented, and for ensuring effective dissemination of knowledge among the participating stakeholders and targeted beneficiaries. Suffice it to say that when a country or an institution adopt a very robust M&E processes, it will go a long way to improve the performance of the systems in effect and allow for better design and implementation of future programs and interventions. And that's why we are here to learn what the experiences over the last 2 years and see what we can do going forward. Now, at the project level itself, where we are actively involved, the purpose of monitoring and evaluation is to track implementation and output systematically and measure the effectiveness of programs. It helps determine exactly when a program is on track and when changes may be needed. Monitoring and evaluation forms the basis for modification of intervention and assesses the quality of activities being conducted. And at the global level, it is a platform to bring, to build strong global evidence base for assessing the wide, diverse range of interventions being implemented to address it. At the global level too, it is a tool for identifying and documenting successful programs and approaches and tracking progress towards common indicators across related projects. So as I was saying, at the beginning, at the onset, the COVID has really tested development, practices in general and evaluators in particular around the world in unprecedented ways, and has opened an invitation to reshape and redefine monitoring and evaluation in post-COVID-19 world. To this end, allow me, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, to attempt to outline some key takeaways and recommendations from the field perspective. So we have been on the ground, we have learned some lessons, and it is now up that I try to present to you some of the useful lessons and recommendations that we have over the last 2 years in implementing the COVID programs of the Islamic Development Bank. Now, policymakers must be capable of devising and acting upon innovative M&E measures while engaging a wide range of stakeholders. I think this is very important. And for policymakers to be able to do this, there's the need for that the capacity of these policymakers and stakeholders is built as M&E systems are reformed throughout the lessons learned from the global pandemic. Third, developing monitoring and evaluation systems for evidence-based programming. Now, we don't have to wait when, during times of stability, during times of peace and equanimity, it is necessary to invest in the development of strong M&E system that delivers necessary data for effective and efficient programming. These can also include resilient-related indicators at the beneficiary and systems level. We all of us will agree that the COVID pandemic really took us by surprise, and most governments and institutions and partners were not prepared. M&E systems were not properly adapted, to deal with the crises that were, unfolding. Now that things have subsided, we have learned lessons, and there's the need for us to invest now in preparedness, for future, pandemics when they do, occur. Number 4, we need to identify country-level priorities and need for capacity building to address implementation constraints and the cross-cutting needs and synergies in institutionalizing monitoring and evaluation. So this is very key, and we need to start doing that to be able to build the capacity that I just alluded to earlier on. We also need to introduce and assess tools and mechanisms that are tailored training programs, knowledge sharing activities and publications, and to develop a framework conducive to strengthen evaluative thinking and evidence-based decision making. This is very, very critical, and this is one takeaway that we have learned from the past 2 years experience. Last but not least, there's a need for us to conduct regional capacity building workshops with strong development partners across the spectrum, such as CLARE, the CLARE centers, to raise awareness with the aim of catalyzing internal and external assisted actions in coordinated and in a planned manner. So with this short introductory remarks, these are some of the takeaways that we have learned. And in the interest of time, I will need to pause here and wait for the Q&A sessions when there are issues, and then we'll be able to respond. So I thank you very much for your courteous attention, and thanks, and back to you, Dr. Morkel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Idris. So I think that was an incredible presentation of some of the key lessons that you have learned, as you said, on the ground. And I think that it's unequivocal now and undeniable that expectations are very high of monitoring and evaluation. And as you were listing all of the potential of monitoring and evaluation, what it can possibly do for our achievement of our development priorities, me thinking about how much work we need to do, that once it's undeniable that we have a really important role, do we have those technical capacities and the skills that are needed by our governments in order to produce the kind of systems that are needed for collecting the kind of data, the kind of rapid responses? And I think you touched on some really, really important issues. The fact that one has to have a very contextualized approach. Every country has a different set of context, different set of circumstances, and these country level priorities have to drive a monitoring and evaluation system. So tailored programs, tailored systems, I think that was what stood out really for me from your presentation. So thank you so much for planting seeds of thoughts and how we can possibly engage with you during the panel presentation. I'd like to really encourage the participants to please post your questions in the chat box. If you're on YouTube, please do post your questions there as well. We're keeping an eye on both sides, and we will then present your questions to the panelists once we have the Q&A session. Now, it's my great pleasure to invite Dr. Emmanuel Letete, who is the Head of Accountability in the Prime Minister's Office in the Kingdom of Lesotho, who will talk to us about their response to COVID-19 and how evaluation is seeking to respond better to the crises that we find ourselves in. Over to you, Dr. Letete. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Morkel. And allow me to thank you and CLARE for inviting us to this panel discussions. I wish, first of all, to remind the audience that COVID-19 came at a time when our different projects, strategies, and programs had not really anticipated the risk that was associated with COVID-19. That is to say, your M&E processes had not really anticipated this risk. And therefore, we found it being anticipated in the regional risk frameworks and monitoring and evaluation and learning strategies. COVID-19, therefore, as a result, caused a lot of disruptions in the way the projects were actually being implemented. And recall that there were a huge delays in data collection due to lockdowns, a huge challenge in projects and program financing as a result of cut down in some instances on the budget. And that itself represented the greatest challenge to almost all of us, not only in Lesotho. But without providing additional resources for the running cost, a lot of projects therefore face a critical challenge. So the question that is central here, that is being asked, is to say, how then did we respond to this challenge that is imposed by the COVID-19, and how do we best move ahead of these challenges? What the government of Lesotho did immediately during the COVID-19 was to develop the digital-based monitoring tools, where we would be able to monitor some of the projects, some of the programs, really using the tracking tools that we had, and that those tracking tools will then work in a space of digitalized means, which, however, the challenges still remained with the use of those digital tools, because not the whole economy was privy to energy supply, and that means your monitoring as well was subject to some challenges, especially the data that is supposed to be headed in time. So this is where we face. But then the use of digital tools became very, very important in dashboards. The second point, which I want really to the audience to hear about, was to readjust the risk registers, log frames. Can you hear me, or I'm lost?
Yes, we can still hear you, Dr. Letete.
That's fine. Okay, so I was talking about the second point, where we had to readjust risk registers, our log frames, the impact pathways, the participatory approaches that we then had to really involve other stakeholders using these digital means and using the visual M&E. But I still want to reiterate again that even though we tried that as well, the challenge still remained on the use of digital means, visual platforms, because it is not everyone that had the capacity to utilize those tools. And that was the second point which I needed to talk about. At the third level, the third point which I really needed to talk to was to undertake the regular cross-checking of M&E components, including the indicators that we had prior to COVID-19 and during the COVID-19 and after COVID-19, to using communities and policymakers as well. This had to be revised and reviewed in light of COVID-19, in particular context now of the impact that COVID-19 has had, and we would have then to revise all the indicators, including those cross-checking of ME components. But finally, I want to talk to the issue of beneficiary accountability mechanisms. In the process of COVID-19, the beneficiary accountability mechanism had to be changed a little bit, and the spot checks as well. And let me just indicate that our usual processes is that your beneficiaries will depend entirely on the fiscal checks. That is, you have to go out perhaps and really identify the people that have benefited or that benefit out of the project. But the COVID-19 therefore came as a surprise, and therefore this became almost difficult to really undertake. As such, we would then have to revise those beneficiary mechanisms, how best we will undertake the beneficiary mechanism now after COVID-19 and using these digital means again. So this is the journey that I think we have walked, very difficult though, and which had requires a lot of resources to be devoted into the M&E. The resources that also had been depleted to some extent by the COVID-19 itself. So I would argue that in closing my talk, three things are very important as you look forward to post-COVID-19. The first issue is capacity building of officials that are really entrusted with doing monitoring and evaluation, and that capacity building should therefore include the use of digital means and digital platforms. The second and most important issue is really to devote a substantial amount of resources in the better data collection tools that can now help collect data that is much more needed post-COVID-19, because the physical travel that we had done before might not be able to work for us. And therefore, our investment must be tailored now to really using the digital means. That is the second point. But finally, I would argue that the flexibility in the project implementation, the flexibility in project implementation schedules as an adaptive measure is very, very central and important as we are anticipating the real outcomes of both projects and programs. And those are the 3 points which I think are very important in the post-COVID-19 implementation. Truly speaking, we do not know how long the COVID-19 will last, and the only way is to digitalize our systems as much as possible, but still constrained by the power and the supply in some instances. And those should be supplemented by fiscal checks. But most importantly, we need to digitalize. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you so much, Dr. for that very insightful, I think such meaningful comments there about the hard decisions governments need to take between the, the fiscal constraints and the need to respond to, socioeconomic conditions that have worsened, but at the same time needing to set in place the kind of bureaucratic machinery that's required for robust monitoring and evaluation systems, the kind of investment in the digital technologies, especially, as you said, perhaps the actual physical fieldwork of data collection, paper-based data collection can no longer work and they no longer serve our purposes. So I think some critical points there around how do we continue to invest in monitoring and evaluation in such a way that they do really contribute to dealing with and, reaching our sustainable development goals and, of course, the goals of Agenda 2063. And being able to invest in both, in the programs that are needed to get us there, but also in the systems that require us to be responsive to exactly where we need to be paying attention. So thank you so much for that presentation. I see one question in the Q&A box. If I can encourage you as participants, please do add your questions or your comments as you go along. It might just be a comment if it's not a question. We welcome all of your input, so please do load them there into the Q&A box. I'm very happy now to present to you Mr. Gringosta Kajomba, who is the Chief Economist at the M&E Department of the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs in the Republic of Malawi. Welcome, Mr. Kajomba, and we look forward to hearing your take and how you were able to respond to COVID-19 using monitoring and evaluation. Over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Candice. Indeed, my name is Gringosta Kajomba. I work with the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs as a Chief Economist. I also welcome all the participants, and I say good afternoon to you all esteemed participants this afternoon. I have a small presentation, though not in PowerPoint per se. I'll give you a preamble, then thereafter we'll look at how COVID affected the country in a number of areas: agriculture, health, education, the labor market, and also the impact on the macroeconomic policy environment. And then we'll provide with you as to how The government has responded to such issues in coming up with the focus areas within the strategic intervention that will be implemented in order to address those challenges. So that's the outline of my presentation. First of all, I needed to share with you, my colleagues all over where we are, that Malawi is agro-based in terms of its economy. And as such, we mostly rely on agriculture when it comes to its economy. But as indicated earlier on, it was not only the economy that was affected, so we'll also share with you how we performed in some of the selected even social indicators and how hard it has affected the country. So COVID indeed in Malawi was registered in 2020, and the first case was noted in April. Just like in other countries, we had a number of waves, 1, 2, and 3, but mostly we were much hit hard by the 2 initial waves. And this, at the end of the day, we're able now to see how it has really affected a number of areas. So we had to conduct a study in order to establish the effect of the COVID to our economy, which we came up with a report which we call it socio-economic recovery plan at the end of the day. Because of the situation that we had established, we had to come up with solutions in order to address the challenges that we are facing. So, as I indicated earlier on, we had to appreciate how COVID has affected the economy in general. Initially, we had projected that our economy will grow to a level of 5% in 2021, but because of the COVID, it happened that the growth was not to that level. Instead, it was at 0.9. So you can really appreciate how this disease significantly affected our economy. And even in 2021, we also had projected that at least because of this, definitely we may not be able to realize the 5%, but something closer to about 2.5%. So you can imagine you are moving from a situation where you had projected that you'll be able to realize an economic growth of 5%, but you're ending up registering 0.9, and eventually you're projecting to have a 2.5. This had a serious bearing to the economy. Now moving forward to the agriculture sector, you also needed to appreciate that much as I'm talking that agriculture sector plays a greater role to our economy. It's almost about 80% of the population depends on agriculture for the economy to move forward. Of course, there are other sectors that also have got a bigger proportion, but they may not exceed agriculture. So for agriculture alone, we estimated that the sector will grow by 5.2%, but eventually we only realized that we were able to achieve 3.3%. So this had a serious impact to the economy. That was in 2020, but in 2021 we had projected to have at least 3.5, but that wasn't the case. We didn't reach that level. There was a decrease to the level of 0.1. To the level of 3.3, but the plan was to reach at 3.5. Likewise, the education sector also had been greatly affected by the disease. From the data that we captured, it transpired that schools were closed, and this had a cost attached to it. And especially even in the private schools, they could not even afford to pay their employees because they rely on the salaries that they get. I mean, the school fees that they get from students that they will be able to pay their employees. And this resulted into laying off of employees from the education sector. From the education sector alone, it was estimated that it will grow to a level of 6.1% in 2020 and 6.5% in 2021. But this was not the case. In 2020, it only reached to the level of 1.9, and in 2021, 3.6. This had a bigger impact because we had to compute now the social cost attached to the closure. For information, the schools were closed to about 9 months. So much as we started opening up, but there was a loss attached to that. And from the estimates, it was established that the cost could be closer to about a loss of 5.2 billion Malawi kwacha. So just like education sector, there were also some challenges that the health sector also had because of the pandemic. Some resources had been reallocated to COVID, and this made other priorities to suffer, like in terms of space, even the equipment. Just to cite an example, the health sector was affected in terms of space, even the equipment, like maternity wards, pediatric wards, and even those people that had underlying conditions were also affected because the resources that were meant for these priority areas had to be diverted to address the emergency of the pandemic. And this eventually had to compromise the basket, which was prepared by the government. Luckily enough, there were development partners who had come in to provide a hand in some aspects, but still more, the resources were not enough, because even from the domestic revenue, the Malawi revenue authority were not able also to correct the anticipated target because of the same. Some of the income Malawi revenue authority gets maybe from importation and exportation of other items. So with the closure, they were not able to get such revenues from the border posts, for example. And another area that also was much affected was the labor market. There were job losses that came in due to the COVID-19. And from the survey that was done, it was estimated that in 2019 alone, about 273, there were 2,773, 712 job losses. And in 2021, likewise, though it was a little bit lower, but it was also a huge number, close to 680,000 job losses that were attributed to COVID. And this translates to 3 to 7% job losses in these 2 specific years. So looking at these areas, we would agree with me that indeed COVID had a serious impact to our nation, both economically and as well as socially. So as I earlier on indicated, there were a shortage of staff to attend to the increasing number of infected population due to COVID, and the infrastructure could not accommodate patients because of the demands for those that were infected. And there was also a problem to do with the and availability of drugs in other health-related issues, because the priorities had to be changed now to be focusing on COVID. So these are indeed some of the issues that really affected the health sector, because people would not be able now to meet the critical medical supplies that were needed at that time because of the pandemic. Also COVID-19 affected even the wholesaling and the retailing sectors. And most of the people, they get their informal employment through such areas. But there is a variation in terms of the impact to these sectors. There were some sectors that were more affected, as indicated on, because the majority depends on agriculture. So agriculture was one of the most affected areas in terms of the number. But in addition to that, we also had the tourism sector, which provides also, which includes accommodation and food services. It was also another area that affected, that was mainly affected by the COVID. There are specific statistics that are attached to these sectors in terms of the magnitude of the effect. I think those data can be provided maybe at a later stage, maybe at the question and answer session. But all in all, what I can say is that the COVID really affected Malawi as a country, and there were plans that were put forward in order to address such challenges. One of which I can now talk of building a resilient and sustainable health system, since we have noted the gaps that our healthcare system could not contain the increase in terms, and to a larger extent, the increase in terms of the pandemic. It means now we needed to enhance our capacity in the healthcare systems. We also needed to improve the control and the management of infection diseases, especially even at the border posts, in terms of like this. But we also needed to build the resilience and to also be sustainable in our education systems, because this type of face-to-face kind of delivery in terms of learning, we have noted that it poses a challenge when we have such emerging diseases like COVID. But maybe as we're moving forward, technology has to be employed, like e-learning or e-teaching. And we also have plans that we should improve in terms of building resilience to the economy and the labor market by enhancing the provision of environmental revival for the vulnerable economic sectors. We have talked of accommodation and food sector that were affected. We have to pump in more resources on that to revamp the sector. So in a nutshell, those are the issues that we've been facing, and that's how we have addressed them in coming up with a new strategy on addressing such challenges. So that's all that I can say now, but more might be more will be provided if others maybe want to be interested.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Kajomba. And I thank you for giving us really a deep dive into the sectoral challenges that you experience in Malawi. I think that is quite common across the African continent. I think some of the development challenges that we already had and some of the backlogs that we had in terms of our development outcomes were really exacerbated by the pandemic. And so the question today, of course, is, how can monitoring and evaluation assist us to perhaps build systems, as one of the panelists says, during times of peace or during times of stability, and how can they help us in times when we have these exogenous or external shocks and unanticipated shocks happening. So thank you so much for turning our attention towards the very real impacts that these have had. It's my pleasure now to welcome Juven Fraser to the floor. He is the Program Manager of the Global Evaluation Initiative. He will certainly tell you more about who the GEI is as a global partnership, and we are very pleased as the CLEAR Centers to be part of this global partnership as implementing partners. Juven, over to you.
Thank you very much, Candice, and it's great to be on the call today. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Greetings to everybody from the city of Brussels in Belgium, where the Global Evaluation Initiative is based. We are a collaboration between the United Nations, the UNDP, and the Independent Evaluation Group of the world. I want to kind of pick up where Mr. Kajumba left off, talking about the impacts of COVID. And his presentation was, I think, a fascinating and evidence-based account of the effects that COVID has had on our societies. And one thing that is really clear is that there has been a really savage consequence in terms of our ability to sustain the development progress that has been being achieved over the last 20 years. And I think what we are really coming to understand is that poverty, exclusion, and inequality are the likely results of COVID. And we need to be really thinking deeply about what role monitoring and evaluation can play in a consequence, as a consequence of this really, really, really profound disruption to our civilization, really. We know that COVID has had these intense economic effects, and Mr. Kajumba was talking about those. And I think when you walk down the street in the city where you live, any of the cities that the Islamic Development Bank is working in, you will feel just through your experience that COVID has set people back, and that there are really, really, really serious effects economically. I think we've also come to understand that people have been excluded in ways that were predictable, but which have nevertheless been really serious. So people who've had access to the internet, who've had devices that they could use to sustain their schooling, have also been affected, but not as much as people who don't. So we are seeing that a whole generation of children have been excluded from schooling, and the effects of that on their progression is going to be very severe. And I think we're also starting to understand that people who were vulnerable and marginalized previously have had that experience intensified and amplified. And so what we are really understanding COVID to be is a real savage body blow to the development trajectory that we were on before this all went down. And, you know, I remember in 2019 doing a presentation somewhere and recounting the actually really exemplary progress that had been achieved globally in relation to women's participation in the workforce, child progression, life expectancy, and globally, we can expect that those indicators are going to get worse. And I think the question we need to be asking ourselves is, what does that mean for monitoring and evaluation? How does monitoring and evaluation respond to a global context that has had this incredibly negative experience? And I think what I want to propose is that for people working in both monitoring, by which I mean performance reporting, and evaluation, by which I mean strategic evidence generation and use, have to really think much more directly about how their work supports use. Like, we really can't be in a space where we implement monitoring and evaluation systems that generate data that doesn't get used. We just don't have the bandwidth. We can't afford the investment. We can't afford the institutional energy that it takes to produce information that's unnecessary. And I think that the pressure to make our monitoring and evaluation systems perform better and generate better results themselves, not just report on other people's results, but for monitoring and evaluation systems to get better at producing results is urgent. We need for M&E systems to do a better job of facilitating learning, of fostering accountability, and of strengthening individuals, institutions, and interventions. So when we talk about what that means, I'd like to introduce you to the idea of the Global Evaluation Initiative, which is a program that I'm running and which I explained is a joint collaboration between the World Bank's Independent Evaluation Group and the UNDP. When we think about monitoring and evaluation over the last 30 years, we can understand there up to about 2010, say, as having been a phase in which we talked principally about results. We were really talking about results-based management and looking at what are our outputs, what are our outcomes, and how are we achieving impacts. And that's a really important set of questions. And I think from about, I would say, let's say the global financial crisis of 2008, people started talking about something in addition to the results agenda. They started talking about evidence synthesis, knowledge sharing, and there was a lot of focus put on what we know and how we know that things work. I would argue that since the pandemic, and maybe even a little bit before, we really need to start centering our monitoring and evaluation conversation about systems, evidence systems, how they work and how we strengthen them. And it's in that space that the GEI operates. The GEI is really focused on building monitoring and evaluation systems at the country level. We have a cohort of countries that we work with. We work with a set of partners, and I'll explain our partnership model in a moment. But we are focused on building the monitoring and evaluation ecosystems at a country level. That means that we focus in many ways on governments because they're a key partner in monitoring and evaluation performance. And within governments, we're particularly interested in centers of government. So that would be, for example, a prime minister's office like Mr. Letele represents in Lesotho. But it could be others. It could be a Ministry of Finance, could be a National Planning Commission, but it's the institution that's responsible for monitoring and evaluation regulations, guidelines, practices, sometimes legislation. But we're not only interested in government, we're also interested in how other players in a country M&E ecosystem work, how well they perform, how dynamic and vibrant they are. So we're talking about higher education institutions, civil society, UN agencies, philanthropic foundations. We're talking about VOPs, we're talking about private M&E practitioners, and we want to see those actors in a country M&E ecosystem being much more aligned, working together more successfully, and being better at producing evidence that improves decision-making. For the GEI, we work through, as I said earlier, a collection of implementing partners. And the idea is that we understand that when you are trying to achieve systemic effects, by which I mean when you are trying to strengthen a whole system, you can't do that alone. You have to work together, you need to collaborate, you need a partnership model as the basis of your work, and that's what we do. We work closely with entities like the CLEAR network, which we help support financially, but we also have a big network of non-funded partners who work in this space. It includes many of the multilateral development banks, it includes UN agencies, it includes a range of civil society organizations, and these partners are all working with us to strengthen monitoring and evaluation ecosystems at the country level. We understand that as we think about the COVID experience and what COVID has done to monitoring and evaluation, there are three things we want to be targeting. The first of these is the sustained practice of fragmenting M&E practice. We see all over the world that people come, they're implementing a program, they want to M&E it themselves, and we need to address that fragmentation. We need to converge practices. We need to strengthen systems so that we don't have individual unique M&E systems for every intervention. And we need to get people to think about things in the same way. Sometimes that would involve using shared indicators, but oftentimes there are other more sophisticated ways of promoting collaboration. We also want to ensure that M&E becomes more relevant. We've got to make sure that people are really producing evidence that is required to inform better decision making. As I said earlier, a lot of M&E produces data that is unused, that is just superfluous, and we've got to get M&E more relevant. The third thing we need to do as monitoring and evaluation practitioners is we've got to innovate. We've got to become more creative, we've got to get more imaginative, and in this regard, we know that technology is a key driver. We know that the data revolution has really been an incredibly important element in the COVID experience. As I said earlier, people who have access to data and devices have had a different experience from people who are excluded. And so we need to be thinking about innovation through a technology lens, but also through an institutional and social lens. And those are three of the things that the GEI seeks to do. We want to help converge, we want to ensure relevance, and we want to promote innovation. As I said before, we work with a group of partners that includes people who invest in our work, that includes donors. We work with implementing partners, the CLEAR Network and IPDET. We work with ANAP, the Canadian ANAP, and our range of associate partners. We have 4 program areas, which are building a culture of evidence-informed decision-making, training and professional development, knowledge and communication, and then one that works on partnerships and operations. I could sort of go on and on for ages, but I'm keeping an eye on my time, and so I'm going to limit myself to this. The IsDB is an important member of the GEI network. We're excited to see how we expand our relationship with the IsDB, how we grow the field of monitoring and evaluation to make it more responsive to challenges like COVID. We expect that climate change is going to have similar intense, extreme effects on our societies. We need to be ready, we need to be resilient, and we need to be responsible. And thank you very much for listening to me today. And I'm looking forward to hearing what my fellow speakers have to say. Thanks, everyone. Back to you, Candice.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dugan. Such an excellent presentation. I think you touched on exactly the points we needed to hear today. You know, for us as partners, and you know, I can't speak on behalf of others, but I'm sure all of the points that you mentioned, especially around how do we collaborate better? How do we, you know, add value to each other's work? Because the remit is large. What we need to do is really huge, and not one single organization or institution is able to carry that load. But certainly, if we work across sectors, across disciplines, across types of partners, and we, you know, all pull in the direction that is needed with the immediacy that is needed, you know, it sounds exciting the way you've actually pitched it in terms of how we could address some of these issues. But, you know, such an on-point presentation, and I'm sure there'll be many questions that come your way around how do we do some of these things that you pointed out as being the challenges. It's my pleasure now to hand over to Professor Ian Goldman. He's a senior evaluation advisor for CLEAR Anglophone Africa and holds a number, or wears a number of hats as well. Perhaps he'll find some time to tell you about them. He'll be talking to us about something really specific, and I think that most of us need, you know, this rapid response and the ability to respond rapidly with the production of evidence. And so he'll be talking to us about the role of rapid evaluation in strengthening recovery programs. Ian, over to you. Thank you.
So, hello everybody. Good to be with you, and my first time to have an interaction with the Islamic Development Bank, except on a GEI project. And yes, so I'm trying to do something that's much more specific and focus on you know, how we can apply rapid methods in the types of crises that we've just experienced. And as Dugan says, I mean, we just had 40 degrees centigrade temperature anomalies in the Arctic and the Antarctic. We're heading for massive climate disruption, and our governments, I'm afraid, are not taking it seriously enough. So these crises are going to come. So first of all, I mean, when we think about using evaluation, it's a tool for public management, and not just public management, of course, non-government, etc. as well. But if we think of the policy and program cycle, we start with an agenda, we analyze the problems, we develop an intervention that we want to do, we design that intervention, we then implement it, and then we look for outcomes and impacts. And in the process, we need to document, reflect, and learn. But so some of the tools, I mean, Dugan mentioned research synthesis, but diagnostic evaluations are one of the tools we can use in the diagnostic phase, looking at participatory data, developing theories of change, which are needed in most evaluations, developing the monitoring systems, using the admin data around implementation, thinking about implementation evaluations, coming from rapid methods, for example, for evaluative thinking, e.g. how we use workshops. Again, how can we use existing administrative data to look at outcomes? We may want to do outcome impact or economic evaluation to try and understand the changes that have been brought about. And again, there are rapid methods we can be looking at, like evaluative workshops. So evaluation is not just at the end of the process. We can be using it throughout the whole policy program cycle, and rapid evaluations similarly can be used throughout. So first of all, what is rapid evaluation? So in South Africa, we've developed a guideline you can see there, which has been adapted in other countries in Africa. And we've suggested that we're talking of 6 to 12 weeks to production of the report. Some people would say 6 months is rapid, but in our context, that's what we've taken on board. You'll also have heard perhaps about what's called real-time evaluation, whose primary objective is to provide feedback in a participatory way during the evaluation process. And this has been developed particularly in humanitarian responses. And there's a link there which may be useful for you. But I'm going to concentrate a bit more on the rapid. And one of the key things I want to say is when we're talking about rapid evaluation, we need to not just think about the doing of the evaluation, but we need to think about the pre-evaluation process, developing the concept note, developing the terms of reference, planning the design, setting up your management arrangements, getting buy-in from stakeholders so they own the evaluation. If you need to do supply chain processes, those can often take a long time. So you need to think about how we speed those up. There's actually what we can do about speeding the evaluation up. And then after the evaluation, there might be a management response, an improvement plan, communication. Again, how can we speed up this whole process, not just the actual doing of the evaluation itself? So what are the advantages of rapid evaluations? They can be more timely. And so if you've got some priorities which are emerging, as might happen during crises or during recoveries, new ideas are emerging, you hadn't planned for it, a rapid evaluation provides an opportunity. It's easier to do with internal people because you're talking of 6 to 12 weeks, perhaps not 6 to 12 months. And so if you need to allocate internal people, that becomes possible. If you're doing it internally, you won't need a supply chain process, but can also speed up the process. Or if you choose a process where you get an evaluator to facilitate, but not actually just do the evaluation for you, that can also be a quicker supply chain process. Generally, they'll be lower cost as they're quicker, but also because they use internal people. And because you may be trying to do something which is less generalizable, because you can't get as much data in a short period of time, you may have flexibility to use innovative methods. But some of the disadvantages are you can have less time on the process with stakeholders, which can reduce ownership and also reduce feedback, which can impact on quality. You obviously have less time on data collection, and that can reduce robustness. If it's undertaken internally, you need people to have the time to do it. They need to have the capacity to do it. And there's a danger that if it's undertaken internally, it can be less objective or more easily dismissed by senior management. And if capacity is limited internally, it's going to affect quality. It can feel rushed, and it's possible that some stakeholders may feel they've not been consulted. You may need to be very efficient in what you do, and so there can be less time for learning, as you've got to just go out and implement very quickly. And there can be a reduction in quality as there are fewer quality control measures. So situations that favor more rapid evaluation is where you do need real-time feedback. And an example would be outcomes from recovery measures, where you need to get the results in 2 to 3 months. And from a recent training I did in South Africa, the example came up about addressing storm damage. Another is where your primary purpose is formative around organizational learning and problem solving. For example, does a pilot seem to be working? E.g. in South Africa, we implemented a relief of distress grant. Does that seem to be working? Of course, where the evaluation budget is very limited, and also where you've been able to narrow down what you're doing into a much more specific and narrow topic or geographical area. But rapid evaluations are not a panacea. And there are cases when you need to be very careful about doing rapid evaluations, and you need to do a more rigorous and more robust one. For example, where you need to be very sure that the picture is correct. So for example, in a case where a program or policy is very large and you need to get a very clear picture of benefits and how it is working, otherwise you may make a misjudged decision with very big implications. And another is where it's very critical program that will affect people's lives and communities at large. And if you take a major decision again, there are major risks around that. Another case is where there's actually a lot of contention about the policy or the program. So if you do a quick and dirty evaluation, it could result in a result that will be challenged. And a classic example in South African context is a child support grant, where there's very strong views, differing views around it. And if you were to do a rapid evaluation, you could just play into the hands of one of those views. And also where you can anticipate and plan for the decision points by scheduling the evaluation well in time, there's no excuse really for doing a rapid evaluation when you actually know that, if you plan properly, this program is ending in 3 years, you plan the evaluation in time. So just some examples. I actually did a rapid evaluation of the emergency response by UNICEF in Venezuela. And this involved a scoping visit and then about 3 months to do the detailed field work and to draft the report. But it took another 2 months to finalize the report. And then I was also involved with the Western Cape in 3 rapid evaluations, one about SMME relief schemes in relation to the tourism industry, another about the food relief provided during COVID-19, and another about the sort of emergency supply chain measures which were implemented. So these are just examples of the sort of things that you can do, and you can see they fit into these types of reasons that would favor doing more rapid evaluations. So they have a real opportunity. There's a place for them. We need to do a lot more work around them. There's a danger that the quality may not be good enough, and so it needs to be managed very carefully. But they do have a real opportunity, and there's a huge amount of interest around at the moment in rapid evaluations, and we need to be developing a lot more good practice in how to manage these effectively. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you so much, Ian. I always enjoy these presentations on rapid evaluations because it just highlights why it's gaining popularity. I think when the occasion calls for it, I think can be really useful. And certainly, I think in this need for responsiveness by governments, I think that's why it's gaining in popularity as well, and why we're being asked about it even as Clear AA so often, especially in terms of training and so forth. We have a couple of questions. So now it's over to ourselves as participants, and we have a couple of questions that have come through in the chat boxes. And so I will take a few. We have about 15 minutes, and we'll see how far we can get. The first question is for Dr. Ishak Idrisu. Thank you, Dr. Ishak, for your presentation and shedding the light on the decentralization approach tackled by the IDB by establishing regional hubs and the response strategy implemented as of COVID response. I want to know more about the innovative M&E measures executed in that regard. So the question, just in summary again, the innovative measures executed in light of the decentralization approach tackled by the IDB by establishing regional hubs and its response strategy to the COVID response. Over to you, Dr. Idrisu.
Thank you once again, Candice, and thanks to our viewers and listeners. for being with us all this while. Yes, indeed, if my recollection is right, the Islamic Development Bank was one of the first MDBs to do evaluation of our SPRP, COVID interventions, while this it was still ongoing. Now, what is important here is that, or the lessons that we have learned, which is part of the innovation, is that don't wait till the end. It may be too late for you to make amends. So that is one important takeaway. Monitoring and evaluation should be a continuous process, and relying, and this would help you to be able to catch issues and be able to address them as you go. But if you wait till the end, as it is being done in some cases, it may be too late to be able to address certain real challenges. Now, the second innovation that came in was that the Islamic Development Bank had moved away, not moved away, they had complemented the traditional M&E systems by as I said, we leverage technology. We had the platforms, so we're able to see real time what was happening, the progress that were being made, the challenges that were being encountered in the implementation of the COVID interventions. And so we're able, with real-time data, we're able to quickly adjust and to be able to know what was happening and what needed to be done rapidly to overcome issues. So technology really helped us a lot. And bear in mind that during the COVID pandemic, there were travel restrictions, and so we couldn't travel. It became very difficult for you to really know, sit in Jeddah or sit in Kampala and know what was happening in Mozambique or what was happening in Somalia or even in other parts of Uganda. So we really had to innovate to be able to know what was going on by using technology, and that really came in very, very handy, and we're able to adjust programs immediately to address country needs. So that really ties in very well with what Prof was talking about, rapid response or rapid evaluation. It is not a substitute, but then it helps you immediately to know what to do. And then
I'm not sure whether it's my network.
No, I think it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Okay.
I think it's his connection, yes.
Okay. So I think we received a large part of the response. I hope that Dr. Umar will join us again. But I think we've heard, a lot about technological innovation, and that has come through quite strongly in, I think, all of the panelists' presentations as well. And in fact, to go back to another question to our government representatives, a question raised here on the pandemic, that it has exacerbated development challenges, while some sectors witnessed quantum leaps forward, particularly in terms of the digital divide and the buy-in of the fintech industry, etc. How can we then prioritize these sectors, the health, education, and digital economy? So that is for Lekete and Mr. Kajomba. I don't know who would like to take the question first.
Yeah.
Do you mind if you can come again on the question? I just got the last bit.
Yes, it's quite a long one, so let me read it again. So the question is, the pandemic has exacerbated development challenges, while some sectors witnessed quantum leaps forward, particularly in terms of the digital divide, buy-in of the fintech industry, etc. How can we prioritize these sectors? Umar,
Hello?
are you back? We see that you're back, Umar. Would you like to close off your last statement? You dropped off the call, but perhaps you want to finish your last sentence to us.
Yes. So this is what, so just to close up, and more importantly, we develop what we call, the feedback loop. we kept on, readjusting subsequent, programs based on the information that we were getting. And, this really helped to improve the design of, the interventions that we had. Lastly, we're able to leverage, partnerships. We're able to count on our, development, partners to be able to provide information where, we're not able to, the bank was not able to, access. So partnership working with other MDBs really came in very handy. We're able to gather information, and that really fed, very much well into the designs of our operations. So innovative, yes. To recap, one, don't wait, till the end. It's a continuous process. Two, go beyond the traditional, M&E tools, and try to supplement with other non-traditional ways of gathering, information. Leverage, technology to be able to get real-time, data and information to adjust your programs. Rapidly, look into country needs, because during crisis, things keep evolving and things keep changing. So you cannot wait. So you need to adjust your programs as you go, along. Don't wait till the end. Number three, develop this feedback rule and loop, recalibrate and, get subsequent intervention to benefit from the rapid, evaluation that you have done. And lastly, leverage, partnership. Rely on your partners, get information from them to be able to improve on your designs and implementation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Idris. So you have a wealth of experience and expertise in this area, and I think that we really do welcome further conversations with yourselves around some of these approaches that you have followed. The question was mixed was to, I see Dr. Etete, your mic is unmuted. Would you like to go for it? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, can you come again on that question so that we are all clear and the audience can hear it well?
Also,
Hello?
can you try to... Yes, I'm sorry, I was just muted for a second. I'm going to try to also interpret the question. It's quite long. So I think what the question is asking is about the fact that the pandemic exacerbated existing development challenges in some sectors. So, for example, health and education and other sectors experience quantum leaps. Talking there about the digital divide actually widened, and some sectors, I would say backwards, and others, went forward leaps and bounds. The pharmaceutical industry, of course, and so forth. How can we then prioritize the sectors that have suffered as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Michael. I think, to be honest here, we need to prioritize the sectors based on a certain matrices. For instance, we should be able to look whether we are protecting society, which is basically one of the most important things during the COVID-19. And those sectors that really are very central in terms of protecting society must be given priority, and that is your health sector, education sector. And by the way, those are also the sectors that are really very fundamental for the economic recovery as well. So I would suggest that they ought to have been given priority. But on the other side, because the COVID-19 had cut across all the sectors, it would have been very important for the implementers or policymakers to look deeper into the projects, the real projects and programs that are meant for recovery. And those programs and projects should therefore be prioritized while paying attention clearly to the concept of agility in the project implementation. That is your flexibility and your changing of tools of monitoring and your ability to do a continuous tracking. And that itself becomes important because it also allows for the economic recovery, which all countries are looking for. And that is how I would put the question, or I would answer the question of really, how do you prioritize? But allow me to conclude, or to give my concluding statement really, to say the COVID-19 has changed the way we think about policy, and therefore has demonstrated that we need to be very innovative in our evaluation. The traditional evaluation tools are now challenged. The survey, the data collection tools are now challenged. And as such, more innovative digital-based tools are very important as we do evaluation. And that rapid evaluation becomes so central, particularly during these hard times. Otherwise, we are bound to see our economies going through and going under and collapsing completely at the end of the day. And we have also talked about capacity building, which I still want to reiterate that all these things can only happen if you have that capacity. The capacity to utilize even the digital means, the digital monitoring systems is much more needed today than ever before. Thank you, Dr. Mokel.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Letete. And certainly a subject that needs a lot more time for us to get into. But I'd like to allow Mr. Kajomba, I'm not sure, would you like to add your comments to this question as well?
Thank you, Dr. Candice. Just as the previous speaker has indicated, we needed to find innovative ways in order to solve the current challenges. And as it has been put forward, one way out is to go digital. And the digital, it means we should be able to analyze the situation there and then and provide feedback and respond immediately as necessary. Just like the way it was happening here when we've been facing this COVID-19 pandemic. In our borders, health personnel were able to detect the problem using the rapid tests, and immediately they were to upload into the system, and it would be updating the figures within the same day, such that you are able to analyze as to how many have been affected in a particular day. And that's the way to go. So because we'll be able to come up with the measures that I can address, and you'll be able to know which areas are more affected, and you may provide solutions or measures there and then. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kajomba. And I think that, some of the key points coming, I think, across the board is our ability to respond rapidly, our investment, our need to invest in solutions, the prioritization of scalable, useful data collection and analysis systems, and of course, the ability to collaborate. And that is actually about all we have time for in terms of the Q&A. I'd just like to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for the wealth of information that you shared with us. We certainly will be listening to these recordings again. I personally feel that, there's so much that you've brought to the table that I'd like to just go and deep dive into once again, and certainly take up, the offer of panelists who said, should we have conversations going forward? And it's an absolute yes from the Clear AA side. Thank you, of course, to yourself as the participants for joining us and for staying with us through the course, and of course, posting your questions and your comments. We really appreciate your feedback. And thank you, of course, to the IDB for hosting this. The symposium is so important and gives us a chance to start the collaboration process by sharing knowledge in the first instance. And now I'd like to hand over back to Mr. Hanafi. Thank you so much for this opportunity, sir. Over to you to talk to us about day 2 of the symposium. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Candice, and to our distinguished panelists. If I may just ask everyone to switch on their cameras so we can take a gallery picture of the participants. And also, as they say nowadays, smize. So smile with your eyes too, and hold the smile for a few seconds so we can have our colleagues taking the picture and documenting this wonderful and lively session. All right, let's hold 1 and 2, 3.
Right, gentlemen. on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your contributions. This has been a wonderful and lively session. Please stay tuned. We have one additional session for the rest of the day. It's at 4:30 Jeddah time, which is GMT +3. And it would be on from our colleagues from the Global Environment Facility, Independent Evaluation Office on the approaches and methods to climate change and environmental evaluations. So looking forward to that. Thanks again to our colleagues from ClearAA and looking forward to further collaboration in the recent future. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.